How are you tonight? So, I want to talk to you tonight about a purpose. We all have a purpose, a reason we're here. And I want to begin by just kind of thinking about it in terms of our names. Did you know that Jesus was named? And whoever names you has some say in your purpose, has some say in why you're here. There's a time when Jesus didn't have a name and then he received a name. I have it here for you. It's Matthew chapter 20, verse 21. An angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. So what is an angel? It's a messenger from God. He says, you shall call his name Jesus. So this came from God through the messenger of the angel. You shall call his name Jesus. Why? Why would you call him Jesus? For he will save his people from their sins. Jesus' name was tied to his purpose. Jesus began with this name and this purpose, and it was untrammeled, it was beautiful, it was pure. Me, not so much. We often need a name, a new name, for a course adjustment. My name is Joseph. That's when I asked my parents where I got my name, my grandfather was named Joseph. But if you look up Joseph, it's a Hebrew word, and it means to add. To add. He shall add. Okay. Add what? And I have been around a long time, and I'm still learning how to live into my name. You were given a name. Have you thought about your name? In the ancient culture, when you were given a name, it had a purpose behind it. There was a reason behind it. In America, you get a name because somebody thought it sounded cool. When we named our kids, we went through names, and my wife's a school teacher, and that meant that if I came up with this name, she'd go, no, I had a kid in second grade, I didn't like that kid, and so we're not going to name that kid. So we don't think about the way we name our kids, but in Jesus' day, they did. In biblical times, names meant something. Abram was changed to Abraham. If you have a cell phone, this would be a good time to silence the cell phone. Sarai became Sarah. Jacob became Israel. Cephas became Peter. And when God changed the names, he often gave them a new ministry. He says to Abraham, this is the kind of person you're going to be. He says to Peter, this is the kind of apostle you're going to be. He gives them a new purpose. He gives them a new direction. He sometimes even gives them new gifts and people to use those gifts upon. You have a name. I have a name. I want to use the word significance. Can you just imagine the word significance? Because significance talks about purpose. And within the word significance, the first four letters, there's the word sign. Do you remember that? Can you see that in your head? So sign, what does a sign do? A sign points away from itself to something else. We're not amazed by signs. Signs are conveyors of information. They're conveyors of ideas and thoughts, but a sign is really just a sign. We need them, but they're just little indicators of something else. In John's gospel, his favorite word to describe miracles was the word sign. This is the second sign Jesus did. This is the third sign, pointing to something higher and holier than the actual thing that was going on. Many times in John's gospel, Jesus would say something like, I am the door, I am the good shepherd, I am the bread of life, I am the living water. He would use these metaphors as signposts to point to something else, something higher, something holier. I'm intrigued by that. Jesus had an expression of significance. He had a way of presenting himself into this world. And one of the things that is fascinating about Jesus is that he really didn't teach a lot of new doctrine. If you look at the doctrine that Jesus taught and the doctrine found in the Torah and in the prophets, not anything really new there. But the people were still amazed. They were amazed at him. In fact, in one place it says, when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching because he taught as one who had authority and not as their teachers. It's amazing. He said in another place, when the crowds heard this, they were astonished at his teaching. There was something about the way Jesus presented himself that blew people away. We've never heard anything like this, he said. I think about even just the conversations that Jesus had. The conversations alone are worthy of study. We think about Jesus as being a great preacher and a great teacher, but think about some of his conversations. In John chapter 2, he has a conversation with Nicodemus, the teacher of Israel. You turn the page, and in John chapter 4, Jesus is having a conversation with a woman of Sychar, the woman by the well, who wasn't even a Jew. You turn the page, and he's having a conversation with a man who had been an invalid for 38 years. You turn the page in John 6, and he's having a conversation with people who want to make him king by force. You turn the page in John 7, and a whole bunch of them are quibbling about him being busy on the Sabbath and working on the Sabbath, and he's having a conversation with legalists. In John 8, he's having a conversation with a woman who'd been caught in adultery. In John 9, he's having a conversation with a man who'd been born blind. Conversation after conversation after conversation. There was something about the way Jesus made people feel in their presence that they could come to him and talk to him. He would ask them questions. Do you want to be well? Go get your husband. You've got 5 husbands. Don't you want to be born again? On and on and on. So there was something so fascinating about Jesus that I want us to spend a moment about this, because I think this is super important. Jesus was always pointing people away from himself towards the Father. But unlike Jesus, we're often trying to perform, whether we're doing that in a public speaking situation or a teaching situation or an event planning situation or maybe with an instrument. We're trying to perform in such a way that people will think highly of us. This is nothing new, because unlike Jesus, we're often trying to perform in such a way to draw attention to ourselves. And that appeals to our ego. There's an Old Testament flannel graph story about the Tower of Babel. Do you remember this story? And the people got together and they built this tower. It was a ziggurat, really. It was a giant pyramid that went as far up into the heavens, and it was something else. It was huge. And the fascinating thing about that is said this in Genesis 11:4. They said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a" what? A name for ourselves. I want you to remember my name because of what I've achieved. And the story says that they were scattered because they sought to make a name for themselves. So what is your name? Okay, let me tell you what your name is. I'm going to give you your last name first. Your last name is, you're the beloved of God. That's the deepest truth about you. Every single one of you. You're the beloved of God. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become the children of God, those who believe on his name. Your last name is that you are the beloved of God. But do you know that you have a first name? Or as my Cajun friend Mark says, you have a front name. Did you know you have a front name? You have a first name. You have a name that is an indicator of why you're still here. You have a name that is a clue to your purpose. your significance, why God's left you here, why you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to be doing with this life. I'll give it to you this way. When I became a pastor in 1984, my father, I was ordained, and my dad, who was a pastor at the time, he called me and he said, well, now that you're a pastor, Joe, you're going to have to discover the gospel according to Joe. What? I was 26 years old. He said, you're going to have to discover the gospel according to Joe. And I thought, I don't understand. He said, well, you don't get to make up a gospel. But just like there's a gospel according to Matthew and a gospel according to Mark and Luke and John, it's all the same gospel, but each of them say it differently. And so you're going to have to discover the gospel according to Joe. What is your unique expression of your belovedness in this world? I was 26. I didn't have a clue. I'm 66 now. I have a clue. I know why I'm here. And the reason I'm here is different than the reason you're here. My significance is different than your significance. My purpose is different than your purpose. So let me give it to you very quickly. Your significance is based upon your spiritual gifts. It's based upon your passions in life, what really gets you excited, what makes you weep or pound the table when you hear about it. It has to do with your abilities, what you're actually naturally hardwired to do. It has to do with your personality. Are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? It has to do with your experiences, your painful experiences, your pleasurable experiences, your educational experiences, your vocational experiences. It has to do with your age. I'm a 66-year-old white guy in a middle class and lived in the mountains almost all my life. That affects my significance. It's what I'm put on the planet to do. What I'm trying to tell you is that when you find the gospel according to you, then you will express it in a way that the world will be amazed. Scriptures tell us in Genesis 1:26, then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule. Okay, what in the world does that mean? I believe that we are all made in the image of God, and therefore we need to create. What He had just done was create something. He took something out of nothing. Out of nothing, He made something. It's called ex nihilo. Out of nothing. I can't do that. Can you do that? I can't do that. I can't create my own dirt. I have to start with something. Only God can create that way. But stay with me. J.R.R. Tolkien. Do you know that name? All right. J.R.R. Tolkien coined a term called sub-creation. And what he meant by that is that a sub-creator takes disparate pieces, things that are kind of chaotic, and brings order out of them. And when you do that, we call that art. We call that being creative. Taking something that already exists, this kind of a jumbled up mess that has no order to it, and bringing order out of it, that is subcreation. And so if we have been made in the image of God, then we have the ability to do something that He can do, which is to bring something orderly out of chaos. The earth was formless without any kind of form, and then the Holy Spirit hovered over it, and suddenly mountains appeared, and oceans appeared, and the stars appeared. Do you remember this? I get to do that. You get to do that. Now, how does that apply to you? I believe in the heart of every human being is a desire in some way to reflect that image back to God, because we were made in the image of the Creator. I'll give you a few examples. Maybe you go to a business. Some of you operate businesses, and the business is in chaos. It's in shambles. But you have been gifted by God to bring order out of that chaos, and now is producing something of value to the community and increasing the bottom line. That is what subcreation is. Maybe you're a hairdresser and you look at that head of hair and you go, oh my goodness, and you start to work on that head of hair, but you're bringing order out of something chaotic. Maybe you're a teacher. My wife's a first grade school teacher, and she gets this raw material of creativity and chaos and ignorance and all kinds of bad parenting and all of that, and by the end of the year, not your kids, But by the end of the year, she's taken all of that in chaos, and now little Johnny can read a sentence and can write and can draw and can add. It could be a teacher. It could be a department that's out of control, and now you've been able to bring it into control. It's taking notes and putting them together. It's taking beats of a drum and making it rhythmic. We all have the ability to do this, bringing order out of chaos. You were created in the image of God, and that means everybody has gifts to do something that would bring glory to God and reveal your belovedness to the world. One of the ways to think about this is a video I want to show you. This is by Michael Jr. You may have seen this video before, but when Michael Jr., this Christian comedian, talks about when you know your why, the what and the how of your life has more impact. Your why is that you're the beloved of God. That's why you're here. You're the beloved of God. Can we show the video now? I hope this works. Watch this.
How do I know? A lot of people, when they think of the phrase, how do I know, they always want to put the what behind it. How do I know what I'm supposed to do? The question that you really should ask is, how do I know why I'm here? Because when you know your why, your what becomes more clear and more impactful. If you know, like for instance, people know that I do comedy, but that's what I do. My why is to inspire people to walk in purpose. So I can do comedy, I can write books, I can be in a movie, because all of it is motivated by my why. In fact, I have a new web series out called Michael Jr. Break Time. We probably just did the 6th episode. It's on YouTube. So every single Wednesday at 3 o'clock, we drop a new episode on YouTube of Michael Jr. Break Time. What it is it's me. I travel around the country, and I do stand-up comedy, in case you didn't know. And in the middle of my comedy set sometime, I'll stop and just talk to my audience. And we've been filming this, and it's pretty cool. So we're in Winston-Salem. I'm going to show you a clip from Winston-Salem. And I'm just talking to this guy in the audience, and he tells me that he's a musical instructor at a school. So I was like, all right, you're a musical instructor. Can you sing? Let me hear you sing a song. So this is what happened at the last episode of Michael Jr.'s Break Time. Check it. So you're a musical director. Cool.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let me get a couple bars of like Amazing Grace. Can you do the first part of that? Go ahead.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Wow. That bro could sing. You know what I'm saying? All right. Now, what you give me the version is if your uncle just got out of jail, you got shot in the back when you was a kid. I'm just saying, let me see the hood version real quick, if you know which version I'm talking about. Just see if that exists. Let me see what you got.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now, right now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
Okay, here's what I want you to catch. The first time I asked him to sing, he knew what he was doing. The second time, he knew why he was doing it. When you know your why, your what becomes more impactful because you're walking towards or in your purpose.
learning the gospel according to you is figuring out what's the best way for me to express my belovedness to this world. There was a time in my life where I was struggling to understand what that was. I had made a mess of my marriage, and I was stepped out of ministry for a while, and my brother, who's a year younger than me, was my pastor. And I asked my brother about what I don't know what to do. I'm 41 years old, and I don't know what to do with my life. I feel like I've lost my whole purpose for existence. And my brother, and by the way, my brother, you need to know this about my brother. My brother is a year younger than me. My brother, his paintings hang in my home. His poetry has been published. He's an antique dealer. He can sing as well as that guy can sing. He can play the keyboard. He can play the piano. He can play the cornet. He is a gourmet cook. He's the best Bible teacher I've ever heard in my life. And I hate him with a beautiful and perfect hatred. He got all of the talent in the family. And so I was asking my brother, I said, I don't know what to do. And he said, well, I was struggling through a crisis of faith, and I decided that I would fast and go to a weekend cabin, a weekend in a cabin up in the mountains. And so I did, and I fasted, and I kept praying, Lord, who am I to you? Who am I to you? What is my purpose? What is my significance? And he said at the end of that 2-day fast, he felt like God came to him and said, you are my artist. And when my brother said that, I went, oh, man, I want that, but I can't draw, I can't sing, I couldn't cook at the time. I just couldn't do, but I wanted that term of endearment like that. And so I began to pray, God, who am I to you? Who am I to you? Who am I to you? And I got nothing for months and months and months. And then one night, my wife and I had friends over, and we had prepared a meal. And after the dinner time, we were, you know how sometimes you'll tell jokes back and forth across the table, and there was a lot of laughter and banter, and all of that was wonderful. And at one point, my wife started to tell a story, and she stopped, and she turned to me, and she said, no, Joe, you tell it. You're the storyteller. And inside, I went, oh. Is that it? And I told the story. And then the people left, and we cleaned up, and I went into the edge of the bed and put an elbow on the mattress, put another elbow on the mattress, and folded my hands under my chin and begged him like a little boy, dear Jesus, am I your storyteller? And I felt like he said, no. Which was a little disappointing. Then I felt like he said, I'm the storyteller. You're the story. Oh my goodness. Sometimes my life is a tragedy. Sometimes my life is a comedy. The joy of my life is that from time to time, he says, tell the story. And that's what I do. About 7 years ago, I had a dream, and in my dream, I had died and gone to heaven. And when I woke up in heaven, I was standing beside Jesus. And by the way, Jesus is a little shorter than me, just in case you were wondering, at least in my dream. And I'm surrounded by 14,000-foot peaks. It's the new heavens and the new earth. And I'm in this valley, and it's a long valley with green grass everywhere, and there's a river that flows along the side over here. And I remember looking around at this beautiful, beautiful mountain valley, and then looking at Jesus and thinking in my head, don't say anything stupid. Don't say anything stupid. And so what I said was, you did a really good job on these mountains. It's a stupid thing to say. And all Jesus, in my dream, he just smiled and said, thank you. Then we walked down this valley, and there's a trail, and we walked hand in hand. And I remember putting my hand out and feeling the mountain grass touching the bottom of my hands, and I could hear the wind blowing through the pine trees, and I could hear the water in the brook not too far away, and the breeze across my face, and I'm walking in the new heavens and the new earth with my Lord, and I'm just thinking, this is amazing. We walk about 3 miles down this trail, and you get towards the end of the valley, and there's a little gray log that's just kind of there by the trail, and we approach that log. Jesus sits down. This is all in my dream. Jesus sits down on that gray log, and then he turns to me, and he looks up, and he says, Joe, tell me a story. And I'm thinking, me? Tell you a story? You're the storyteller. So I'm thinking, well, what am I going to tell him? Prodigal son, that's a good one. Good Samaritan, he'd like that one. So I turned to him and I said, Jesus, what do you want to hear? He said, you choose. And then I woke up. Okay. Part of why I'm still here is to tell stories. And I can tell stories in my job as a pastor, and I do. But do you know what? If I stop being a pastor, I can still tell stories. I can be a greeter at Walmart and tell stories. I've got grandchildren that need to hear stories. I've got friends that still need to hear stories. So storytelling is a part of why I'm here. One of the other things that you can think about is, what would they say to be true about you if they spoke at your funeral? Now, I know this isn't a happy thought. I understand that. But if you were to have someone to stand up and say, this is why this person was on the planet, what would they say about you? If you could figure that out, wouldn't that be something? Why do we have to die before we find out what people think that we're here for? And so I tell you this is what I don't want them to say. That Joe, he was a hard worker. Well, so are Mormons. Man, that Mike, I'm telling you, he was a nice guy. So are Muslims. You don't want that to be what they say about you at your funeral. What do you want them to say? If I knew what they were going to say, then that gives me a clue as to why I'm still here. Does this make any sense to you? Because people experience you and go, I'll tell you why you're here. It's not for what you think it is. This is what you mean to me. So I did something weird. I decided, because I've used this a lot, what would people say to you about you at your funeral? And so I decided I'm going to find out. So I sent an email out to 5 of my good friends that know me really well and know me a long time. And I said, what would you say about me at my funeral? Write my eulogy. And 4 of the 5 wrote back. The other one is not my friend anymore. But 4 of the 5 wrote back, and they were really nice things, really sweet and kind things. And I was really pleased to hear it. But one guy sent me something that rocked my world. And I'm going to tell you about it. Any reward I get for this thing, I'm going to lose by telling it to you right now. His name was Rob, and this is basically his eulogy. He said, I'm going to tell you why Joe Chambers is here. He said, I was hurting so badly at one point in my life. My best friend had lost a child, and I was grieving the loss of my best friend's child and grieving with my best friend. My church was going into the tank. My health was deteriorating. My wife had contracted a rare blood disease and was struggling just through the chemotherapy alone was about to kill her. And I went to a denominational meeting, and I was so discouraged. I was so down. I was so hurt. And the guy at the front of the room said, Joe Chambers is here, and he's here to sit with any of you and pray with any of you if you would like some soul care. And he said, I had no idea who Joe Chambers was, never heard of him before. And I had no idea what soul care was. What I did know is that I was hurting so badly I needed to talk to somebody. And the guy said, you can meet Joe at such and such room. So I'm in there, and here comes Rob. And Rob, this is what Rob said. I sat down. The first thing Joe Chambers says is, I want to read you a poem. And he said, who does that? But then he read the poem. And then Joe said, tell me your story. And I told him my story about my wife and about my friend's son and about my church. And he said, 45 minutes went by. And then Joe said, can I pray for you? And the guy said, yeah, I want you to pray for me. And then Joe said, okay, I'm going to pray for you. And he took a deep breath. And then he prayed. Then my friend said, I don't remember what he prayed. But I know that in the space between his breath and his prayer, God told me everything was going to be okay. So let me tell you who Joe Chambers is. He's the pastor of the Pause. Okay, listen. All my life, I've dedicated my life to speaking or writing. This guy says, no. Let me tell you why you're here. You give space so that God can do what God can do in the silence and in the pause. I don't believe there's ever been a higher compliment ever given to me than to be called the pastor of the pause. I'm still learning. That was 4 years ago, he told me this. My point in telling you all of this is, it's a journey to discover the gospel according to you. So I would ask you to think through, what gives you energy? What do you do that seems to be anointed by God? And one of the things we don't do a very good job of in the church is when someone stands up on the stage and they do something, you go, yeah, that was awesome. God was all over it, and they were horrible. Don't do that to them. If they're horrible at something, don't lie to them and tell them that God was all over it. Because sometimes that puts them down a path that they should never go down. Tell them the truth. But there's something that you're supposed to be doing with your life. Now, I want to show you something. Let's see if I can get my technology to work here, and then we're going to be through, I think. See if this works. So the first night that I was here on Sunday night, do I have control now? Oh, we're way past that. Here we go. This is the, okay, here we go. I'm supposed to be. Am I doing something wrong, Amanda? She went home. I'm pushing wrong, aren't I? Thank you. Oh, see, I created an island. Help me, Amanda. This is worth it, I promise you. It's all my fault. I knew this was going to happen. Pause. Oh, here we go. Okay, maybe I can do it now. Okay. So I'm going to go down. I'm pushing down. Is that right? Okay. So the first night, we were here Sunday night, we talked about the gift of belovedness. Let me see if I can make this work here. Here we go. There's the gift of belovedness. Do you remember this? This is the deepest truth about you. You're the beloved of God. Before He created a star, He thought of you and smiled. That's something for you to remind yourself over and over and over again. Then last night we talked about how do you maintain your spiritual strength, and how did Jesus do it? He created a rule of life. We talked about some of those practices last night. That's a trellis up there. Do you see that? And so Jesus would go out into the solitary places and spend time in silence and solitude and meditation and prayer and worship and Sabbath keeping. All of that was to create space so that He could hear the Father say, "You're the beloved of God." And then tonight I wanted to show you this is uniquely you. You have an expression. That's a DNA thing up there. Everybody's different, and you have a gospel according to you. Now, when you live this way, you rest in your belovedness, and you find these practices through a rule of life, and then you find the gospel according to you, then what happens is fruit happens. It's the fruit of achievement. But I need you to see the sequence. The sequence is so important. First, you rest in your gift of belovedness. Then you open up space with those practices that you do day in and day out so that you can hear the Father say, "You're the beloved daughter of God. You're the beloved Son of God." And then you find that unique way of expressing it. And then the fruit just happens. You don't have to push fruit out. You don't have to work hard at it. It organically shows up. Now, can I just ask you a question? Does that way of living look attractive to you? Yes or no? I'm telling you something. If my wife were here, you could ask her, this is a livable life. You could ask her, does he live this way? And she would say, yes, he lives this way. This is a way to live life. And I'm inviting you to it. This is the Jesus way, or said another way, I'm going to call it the sacred journey. This is how Jesus lived his life. And I'm inviting you to it. It's a simple life. I didn't say it was easy, because it's countercultural. It's not easy, but it is a simple life, and it is a life that Jesus invites all of us to live. But let me show you this. This is not how I lived most of my life. Most of my life, I lived a completely different way. I lived a life of achieving my butt off. Achieve, so that I could make a name for myself, so that you would remember me, that I would make a mark. How am I going to keep that up? How am I going to keep my plates spinning on the stick? How am I going to keep that going? How's that going to happen? I've got to power up on people. I've got to intimidate people. I've got to work 70 hours a week. I've got to abuse alcohol or drugs, or I've got to surf the web or gamble my life away. I've got to do something to keep it going, also that somebody, anybody, will accept me. I'm doing this so that you will like me, that you will accept me, or that somebody will say, you've got enough, you're beautiful, you're handsome, or you're successful. And this is exactly the way of the world. This is the way we live our lives. We achieve our tails off, and then we want to leave a mark, we want to leave a legacy, and we can't do this without abusing something and acting out somewhere. Also, somebody will say, you're the beloved. And then Jesus comes along and says, you don't have to live this way. There's another way to live. And I'm calling you to repent. Do you remember the word repent? What does it mean? Turn around. You're going the wrong way. You're living this way. This way will kill you. There is a way that seems right to man, but the end will lead to destruction. You're living this way. Christians live this way. Churches live this way. And then Jesus comes along and says, I got a better way. Turn around. Turn around. He says, live this way. Live this way. Live this way. You can do it. You can do it.